Hey guys, what's going on? I just wanted to make a video about the coronavirus vaccine because I've had multiple family members and friends ask me what I think about it. So I thought I would just put my thoughts about the vaccine out there. So maybe it'll be helpful, especially to those of you who are not in the medical profession and want to get a better understanding of what this is all about. First of all, I think before discussing how the vaccine works, it might be helpful to do a quick recap of what your cells normally do when they build proteins from the instructions coded in your DNA. So we have a copy of our genetic code in every cell in our body that contains all of the genes for every organ and every tissue, and that molecule is called DNA. Depending on which type of organ or which part of the body that cell is located in, the DNA for different proteins specific to that tissue will be manufactured into proteins specific to that type of tissue within the cell. So the genetic code, which is housed in the nucleus of the cell in the DNA, is kind of like the master copy of all the instructions to build all the different types of proteins, and the code for those different individual proteins that provide our cells with the structural and functional units that make them specific to their purpose within the body, wherever they're located. When your cell wants to make a protein, instead of building that protein directly from the code in the DNA makes a photocopy of itself into a type of molecule called RNA. So, there's a lot of hype about this vaccine being the first RNA vaccine. Keep in mind that we naturally make our own RNA. The RNA is, again, a photocopy of the DNA for a specific type of protein. The RNA leaves the cell nucleus after making the copy of the segment of DNA that's responsible for one particular protein. And then that mRNA travels to the cytoplasm of the cell, where there are little molecules called ribosomes. Ribosomes are sort of like the assembly lines or the manufacturing lines of the cells, where they take the code on that photocopy, which is again called mRNA. The mRNA hops onto the ribosome, which is sort of the assembly line, and it provides the instructions on what order to assemble the building blocks of that specific protein. Those building blocks are called amino acids. And so based on that individual code and the order of the amino acids in that code, that order of amino acids is specific to the structure of that one protein that is encoded by that segment of mRNA. So ultimately, that mRNA tells the ribosome how to build the protein that your cell needs to function. So that's how DNA, RNA, and ribosomes end up giving rise to the proteins that we need in our cells for the normal function of the cells. Now, the way a typical vaccine or a conventional vaccine prior to mRNA molecules worked is that they would actually culture virus and then kill the virus and then inject killed dead virus into the body so that the immune system could recognize the killed virus and stimulate memory to what that killed virus looks like, so that if there is any live virus, your immune system has already seen it and can immediately kick into gear and start producing antibodies to bind to any live active virus that you would be exposed to in your daily life and just shut it down immediately. What this new vaccine, the ones that are manufactured by Pfizer and by Moderna, have done is, and actually it's ingenious and it's revolutionary, absolutely, honestly amazing, is that they have taken, instead of having to culture virus and kill it and then inject dead virus into you, what they've done is they've figured out the segment of the virus that is most readily recognized by our immune systems, and they've taken the mRNA that encodes that specific viral protein, and they're injecting that specific blueprint, that specific photocopy of the genetic code of the virus for only the one protein, that one viral protein, into our bodies, and our cells take up that segment of mRNA, okay? So once that piece of mRNA is in our cells, our own ribosomes in the cells manufacture that viral protein from that individual segment of viral mRNA, okay? So our cells use the mRNA, the code on the mRNA, to build a viral protein called the spike protein, which is a protein that sits on the surface of the coronavirus and is very important to the virus binding to cells. So it's on the exterior and it's readily recognized by the immune system. So when our cells have used the mRNA, when the mRNA attaches to the ribosome builds the protein from the code on the mRNA. The protein of the virus, called the spike protein, is then presented on the surface of our cells. All the proteins we make are presented on the surface of our cells, but when the immune system, when an immune cell comes up to one of those cells that's presenting the protein, and it's one of our natural proteins, the immune system says, oh, I recognize this, we don't need to fight this, this is one of our own proteins, we do not want to attack a cell that presents this type of protein when it's one of our own natural proteins. When the cell presents the viral protein that was made from the mRNA that encodes the viral protein that was given in the vaccine, when that protein is presented on the surface of the cell, the immune system doesn't recognize it and says, wait a minute, this protein doesn't belong here. We need to rev up an immune response against this protein. And so that interaction between the immune cell and the viral protein presented on the surface of the cell stimulates replication of that immune cell that is specifically designed to recognize that viral protein. So then you have a colony of immune cells that remains in your body and is ready to produce antibodies if you are exposed to a live virus that if somebody coughs or sneezes or come into close contact with you and you inhale the virus and it's in your body, that virus is immediately neutralized by the antibodies that were stimulated in response to the immune cell recognizing the viral protein that was produced by your cells. So really it's a very ingenious way of only exposing the patient to the protein that is most easily recognizable by the immune system. The nice thing about the RNA vaccines is that it is much, much easier and much, much faster to rapidly make large numbers of RNA molecules and let your cells do the work of building the proteins that the immune system will recognize than it is to culture large numbers of the virus and then inactivate or kill the virus to prepare it for a vaccine. So you can make much more doses of vaccine in a much quicker period of time. So that's one of the huge advantages of a mRNA vaccine. The other thing is that unlike an inactivated virus, I could only anticipate what the objections would be if there was a conventional vaccine rather than an mRNA vaccine. People would say, oh, nobody's going to inject virus into my body. What if they don't kill all the virus? What if there's still some virus floating around? The thing about an mRNA vaccine is that there's no actual virus being injected. just the genetic code for that one particular protein. And the protein that this segment of mRNA encodes is not a toxic protein. In other words, it's not a viral protein that's involved in harming the cells. It is not a protein that's involved in propagation of virus. It's only a protein that's involved in binding of the virus, but there's no other components of the virus that are being produced. So it's just this one exterior protein that the immune system is most readily able to recognize that is being produced. So not only can you make a lot of this vaccine on short order, you're not even injecting an organism that used to be deadly. You're injecting just the instructions on how to make only one of its components, and it's one of the non-toxic components. So anyway, I got the vaccine yesterday. I feel absolutely fine. I had some very mild soreness in the muscle where it was injected. Not even really that sore, honestly. Like if I wanted to, I could go lift weights with the arm and be fine. Would not have any issues. It's just mildly tender to the touch. Nothing different than sort of your typical response to a vaccine. I've had a couple of doctors who I know about get low-grade fevers just based on their immune system's response to recognize the virus, but those only lasted 24 hours. It did not make them sick. In other words, it wasn't because there was a virus invading them, it's just because their immune response to the protein was so strong that it activated their body to have a low-grade fever. But anyway, that was only a couple of people out of dozens, and their symptoms were gone within 24 hours and was not representative of an infection. It is literally impossible for you to get the infection from this vaccine because it is only encoding one viral protein. It's not the entire virus. I'm trying to think what other questions have been raised about the vaccine and what might be useful for people to know. So I think that's pretty much it. I mean, I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity to have received this vaccine because it's not one of these situations where the doctors are saying, hey, all you people get the vaccine so you can be immune and we're going to wait over here and see what happens and then get it if you guys are fine. That is not what's happening. Every doctor I know, all my friends who are doctors are clamoring, get this vaccine in my arm yesterday. Get me immune to this thing. I want my life back. And I hope that my explanation of the mechanism offered some reassurance so that people can understand how this works. One other thing that I think might be useful to understand is that for people who are worried about mRNA being injected, first of all, RNA does not have the capability to hop into your DNA and disrupt your DNA and modify your genetic code. RNA and DNA are distinct types of molecules, and DNA will not insert a piece of RNA into its sequence. So that's one concern that people have shared, and I would say that does not happen, that is not possible. Second of all, another really important thing to keep in mind is if you're nervous about the viral RNA being in your cells and manufacturing viral proteins, think about this. That is exactly what the virus does when it infects you. In other words, when you get an infection from the virus injects its RNA, but the difference is it doesn't just inject one segment of RNA responsible for encoding one non-toxic viral protein. The virus injects its entire genetic code to encode all of the viral proteins. That genetic code has your cells manufacturing proteins that are toxic to your body and to your cells, and also proteins that are responsible for self-propagation and extending the life cycle of the virus. So when a virus infects you, it is key to understand that that is exactly the same idea in terms of RNA being injected. So in other words, if you don't get the vaccine and you do get the coronavirus, you are still going to have that segment of RNA injected into your cells. The difference is that instead of just that one segment of RNA being injected, excuse me, you're going to have the entire viral genome injected into your DNA so that your cells are not only transcribing the spike protein, which is non-toxic to the cells, but then your cells are also manufacturing proteins that are directly toxic to the cells, and also proteins that are responsible for propagation of the virus. So the virus is able to continue its life cycle and spreading to, more and more and more cells of your body. And once those cells take up virus, the immune system launches a destructive process on those cells to destroy the infected cell. So if you do get the virus, you will have the viral RNA in your cells. The difference is that it won't just be for one benign protein to help the immune system get a recognition of the virus. It'll be for all the proteins of the virus, which includes those proteins that are toxic to your cells and those proteins that enable the virus to continue propagating itself and replicating and spreading to other cells. So if your issue with the vaccine and your fear about the vaccine is having viral RNA in you, that's the whole way that a virus works. You will have RNA in you if you get infected with the coronavirus. They will be in your cells, and they will be hijacking your ribosomes to make viral proteins, except they'll be destructive viral proteins, unlike the vaccine, which only has instructions to code only one viral protein, and a viral protein that's not dangerous or damaging to you. So I think that's probably all the thoughts that I have to share on this, and just once again feeling so grateful to be one of the first people to receive it, to be protected from the virus, even as someone who is at low risk of death from the virus based on my age and lack of medical problems. I have seen young people who have had protracted recoveries and prolonged symptoms and who felt short of breath and have had chest pain and those sorts of symptoms for months after their initial infection. Of course, that is not super common, but it is still not something that I would want to be susceptible to. So I'm super grateful to be getting this first dose, and absolutely ready to get the next dose in a few weeks. Feeling great 24 hours later, advising all my family and friends to get it. And, I hope that for those of you who are have heard things in the media and who are worried about getting the vaccine or who want to understand how it works, I hope that this video that I'm making can at least address some of those concerns and make you feel like you have a better understanding to make a good choice. And that's all I got. So I hope you guys have a good weekend and a good Christmas and New Year coming up. And I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.